albeit indirectly. It involves Caitlin Clark.
WNBA, a Tremos nation that has struggled for profitability for nearly 3 decades, decided to take against its own future. It is a story of economics, ego, and a level of gatekeeping that borders on self-sabotage. Stephen A. Smith calls it the Golden Goose theory. And if you peel back the layers of the 2024 season, past the highlight reels and the post-game press conferences, you find something much darker than just a rookie trying to find her footing. You find a coordinated, systemic rejection of the biggest asset women's sports has ever seen. This isn't just about basketball. It's about a billion-dollar culture war, and we need to talk about exactly how it happened. To understand the conspiracy, you have to understand the money, because the money is the root of the resentment. Stephen A. Smith didn't mince words when he labeled Caitlin Clark the Golden Goose. It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually an indictment of the league's ecosystem. For 28 years, the WNBA has effectively operated as a subsidized entity, relying on the NBA's financial backing to keep the lights on. It was a league built on collective struggle, shared sacrifice, and a grind that very few people outside the arena witnessed. Then, Caitlin Clark happened. And almost overnight, the economic reality of the league fractured. We are looking at a league with 2 distinct economies now. There is the fever economy, and there is the legacy economy. The numbers are staggering, and they paint a picture of why the locker rooms turned so cold. In the 2024 season, Indiana Fever games averaged 1.19 million viewers. That is a statistical anomaly. It's a monster rating. Now look at the games where Clark didn't play. The average drops to roughly 394,000. That is a 199% differential. Think about what that feels like if you are a 10-year veteran. You are playing the same sport, on the same size court, with the same ball. But when the girl from Iowa walks into the building, the world watches. When she leaves, the cameras turn off. Smith argues that this created a structural resentment. The veterans felt their years of labor pounding the pavement, flying commercial, playing overseas to make ends meet, were being invalidated by a rookie who arrived with a private jet charter and a $28 million Nike deal already in hand. The league had a choice. They could have embraced this new reality. They could have ridden the wave. Instead, according to Smith, they chose wrong. They allowed jealousy to fester. They allowed the golden goose to be plucked before she could even lay the eggs that would feed everyone. This resentment didn't just stay in the group chats, it spilled onto the floor. And this is where we have to talk about the physical war on Caitlin Clark. The narrative from the old guard is that rookies always get hazed. Welcome to the W, they say. But what happened to Clark wasn't normal hazing. It was proxy warfare. The flashpoint was Chennedy Carter. When Carter delivered that shoulder check to Clark away from the ball, knocking her to the floor, the mask slipped. This wasn't a basketball play. The ball wasn't even in the picture. Stephen A. Smith identified this immediately as pure, unadulterated resentment. It was a physical assault driven by personal animus. And the aftermath was even more telling. Carter refused to answer questions, saying, "I ain't answering no Caitlin Clark questions," and then doubled down on social media. But here's where the conspiracy deepens. It wasn't just that a player took a cheap shot, it was the league's reaction, or rather, the lack of it. The foul was initially called a common foul. It was only after the internet exploded, after the footage went viral, and the casual fans started asking if the WNBA was a wrestling league, that the league office upgraded it to a flagrant one. This is what critics call the soft quit of leadership. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert was accused of failing to protect her primary asset. In the NBA, if someone took a cheap shot at Michael Jordan in his prime, the league office would have suspended them before the game ended. In the WNBA, the referees and the leadership seemed terrified of upsetting the veterans, so they let the hazing continue. Now we need to address the instigator defense, because this is where the story gets nuanced. Stephen A. Smith makes a critical point that often gets lost in the victim narrative. Caitlin Clark is not a passive angel. She talks trash. She initiates contact. She does the "you can't see me" gestures. She is arrogant on the court, and she has every right to be. Smith argues that Clark instigates resentment because she refuses to kiss the ring. In a normal timeline, a rookie coming in with that much swagger would get checked. But because Clark represents the system, the white, media-friendly superstar, that checking morphed into a racial and cultural battle, and that battle found its 2 generals, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. This is the engine of the modern WNBA. Reese has brilliantly embraced the role of the unapologetic heel. She is the Joker to Clark's Batman. But Smith is brutal in his assessment of this dynamic. He says plainly, "She ain't Caitlin Clark." The argument is that while Reese is a phenomenal talent and a rebounding machine, her fame is symbiotic. It feeds off the Clark ecosystem. The ring finger moment at LSU, the hard fouls, the media spats, it all generates headlines because it is happening in relation to Clark. Reese feeds the jealousy narrative to build her brand as the bad girl, and Clark's camp uses it to reinforce the victim narrative. It's good for business, but it's toxic for the culture. But physical fouls are one thing. The intellectual dishonesty is where this conspiracy truly goes off the rails. Enter Cheryl Swoops. Swoops is a legend, a Hall of Famer. Her name is etched in the bedrock of the league. But in 2024, she became the face of the disinformation campaign against Clark. This wasn't just hating, it was rewriting history. On Gilbert Arenas' podcast, Swoops claimed that Clark was a 25-year-old playing against teenagers. Clark was 22. Swoops claimed Clark broke the scoring record because she took 40 shots a game. In reality, Clark averaged roughly 22 shots. These weren't slip-ups. You don't make mistakes that specific by accident. Smith and other analysts viewed this as a deliberate attempt to delegitimize Clark's greatness. If you can't beat her on the court, you attack her legacy. You frame her as a volume shooter, a bully, a fraud. The fallout from this was catastrophic. It ended a decades-long friendship between Swoops and Nancy Lieberman. Lieberman, another legend, called Swoops to say, "Facts matter." And that was it. Friendship over. That is the depth of the divide. The Clark question became a litmus test. You are either with the new era and the money, or you are protecting the legacy and the pride. Lieberman asked the question that defines this entire saga. Why would you get mad at the cash cow? It's a question the old guard still hasn't answered. And then we have the Olympic snub. The decision that cost the sport millions of eyes and millions of dollars. The official story is simple: basketball reasons. The committee said Clark lacked experience. They said she wasn't a good enough defender. They said they prioritized chemistry and seniority for a team that has won every gold medal since 1996. That explanation is, to quote Stephen A. Smith, business negligence. It's insulting to the intelligence of the fans. Team USA was going to win gold. They could have played with 4 players and won gold. Smith argued they would win by 30 points regardless of who was the 12th woman on the bench. The Olympics are not just a tournament, they are a global marketing exhibition. By leaving Clark home, they chose to hide their biggest star from the world stage. Why? The finger points directly at Cheryl Reeve and the old guard. Before the selection, Reeve had tweeted frustration that the WNBA's marketing was solely focused on the Indiana Fever, ignoring her own team, the Minnesota Lynx. She famously tweeted, "The W is more than one player." Critics like Christine Brennan framed this as the smoking gun. Reeve, as the head coach and a powerful voice in the selection room, had the power to humble the rookie. The theory is that the committee viewed the Olympics as a gold watch, a reward for tenure. You put in your time, you get the trip to Paris. Clark hadn't paid her dues, so despite the fact that she was the single most popular athlete in North America, she was left home. But there is a twist in this story that most people missed: a secret offer. Reports confirm that USA Basketball did approach Clark, but for the 3x3 team, the JV squad. And here is where Clark showed her hand. She declined. She and her camp reportedly viewed the 3x3 tournament as a consolation prize, a way to use her name to sell tickets without giving her the prestige of the main roster. By saying no, Clark engaged in a power play of her own. She refused to be compartmentalized. The result? The gold medal game drew 7.8 million viewers, a great number, historically. But months earlier, Clark's collegiate championship game drew 19.5 million. That gap, that 12 million viewer difference, is the cost of the conspiracy. USA Basketball secured the gold, but they left an entire generation of new fans on the table. They chose to be right about basketball purity rather than relevant in the global conversation. The failures extended to the corporate world, too. Nike, the machine that made Jordan and LeBron global icons, seemingly fell asleep at the wheel. Clark signed a historic $28 million deal, yet her rookie season came and went without a signature shoe on the shelves. Dave Portnoy called it the dumbest contract he'd ever seen, arguing Clark got screwed. The conspiracy theory here is fascinating. Nike also sponsors A'ja Wilson, the league's reigning MVP. Wilson was finally getting her due with a shoe deal around the same time. Did Nike hold back Clark to avoid upsetting the pecking order of their roster? Did they fear that giving the rookie a shoe before the MVP would cause a revolt in the locker room similar to what was happening on the court? Nike's passivity allowed competitors like Wilson Basketball and Gatorade to swoop in and capitalize on Clark's image. It looks like corporate malpractice, or perhaps internal paralysis caused by the same culture war that was consuming the league. And where was the leadership? Where was the commissioner? Stephen A. Smith openly called for Kathy Engelbert's resignation. He accused her of a soft quit. When the racial toxicity in the fan base reached a boiling point, when players were accusing Clark's fans of racism and misogyny, Engelbert tried to play it down. She compared the rivalry to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. It was a clumsy, tone-deaf attempt to frame a culture war as just business. It alienated everyone. The players felt unsupported against the trolls. Clark felt unsupported against the physical targeting. Engelbert failed to bridge the gap. She let the resentment become the story. A strong leader would have fined Chennedy Carter immediately. A strong leader would have forced a truce. A strong leader would have demanded Clark be on that plane to Paris. Engelbert did none of that. We also have to talk about the subsidy argument because this is the most humiliating part for the haters. The lifestyle upgrade the WNBA players enjoyed in 2024, that was bought and paid for by the Clark economy. The charter flights, something the Players Association fought for years to get, were only expedited because of the security concerns surrounding Clark. The veterans got what they wanted, but they got it because the white girl needed it. Smith argues that this humiliation fuels the fire. It's a constant reminder that their decades of labor weren't enough to move the needle. It took Clark's sizzle to unlock the corporate coffers. So what is the conclusion of the Clark conspiracy? It wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of economic shock, cultural protectionism, and structural incompetence. The WNBA was handed a winning lottery ticket, and instead of cashing it in, the old guard spent the entire season trying to prove that they didn't need the money. They tried to haze the Golden Goose. They tried to gatekeep the Olympics. They tried to rewrite the history books to minimize her talent. But the numbers don't lie. The real reason Caitlin Clark faced this firestorm is that she broke the system. She exposed the fact that the league was stagnant without her. And for the people who built that league, that is a pill too bitter to swallow. The 2024 season was a war between the past and the future. The past won the battle. They kept her off the Olympic team. They beat her up on the court. But looking at the ratings, looking at the merchandise sales, and looking at the undeniable shift in gravity, the future is going to win the war. The only question left is whether the WNBA will survive the transition, or if their resentment will burn the house down before they can truly enjoy the warmth.